Chapter 2. What a Difference a Day Makes. Inscrutably, Bryan seemed to be unfazed by what we'd just heard. He was even confused about why I was crying. I looked at my husband with an expression of disbelief and blurted out between sobs, "John!" "What?" Bryan said. "It just means that John is going to be like your grandfather." I didn't know what he was thinking. I sincerely wondered if he had been in the same room with me. My grandfather had been the lead geologist for Acro, the oil giant. He was one of the most famous people in the field of petroleum development in the world. He had a PhD. He was most definitely not nonverbal autistic. I said, "What? My grandfather?" Bryan went on as if it were obvious. "Yeah, he was kind of quiet and spent so much time alone in research." I came to learn that this was a common reaction of fathers. Denial, avoidance, and deflection can grip dads like a bulldog, along with any other coping mechanisms that let them preserve their vision for the future of their child. Bryan instantly created an alternate reality in which the most positive and least likely outcome was inevitable. He was violently shaken from this fantasy when I bawled, "John is autistic. They just said he will never speak, that he may spend his life in an institution. My grandfather was a scientist. The two aren't even close." To my husband's credit, my words and reaction shook him out of his denial as swiftly as it had set in. He didn't get angry at me or retreat into a silent tantrum like so many dads do. Instead, he went home and went straight to work on a solution. Within 24 hours, Bryan had devoured just about everything he could find on autism research. He also read everything he could on legal obligations of different institutions from the school, our home state of Washington, and the federal government. Back in 2000, there wasn't a lot of information online about autism research. In fact, the only bright spot we could find was a UCLA study by Ivar published in 1987, about a type of one-to-one therapy called Applied Behavior Analysis, ABA. The research was conducted over a 3-year period and found that 40% of children who were exposed to ABA at least 40 hours per week became indistinguishable from their typical peers. All the children who were successful in the program started this therapy before they were 40 months old. The twins were 39 months. A combination of relief and panic took hold of us. We had hope, but we didn't have time. We found out that a full-time ABA program cost over $100,000 per year each child, and there were no BCBAs or board-certified behavior analysts, the specialists who are trained in this sort of therapy, where we live in Spokane, Washington. Bryan found that a law passed by the federal government entitled IDEA seemed to demand that the school district cover this therapy. Exactly 48 hours after we had been given the life-altering news, we marched back to the same school with a large binder filled with research and legal precedent. To say that the principal was not at all pleased would be an understatement of gargantuan proportions. I don't think that he had ever been challenged before. In stark contrast, however, the therapists and teachers who I would come to love and admire over the following years were our hidden cheerleaders. They secretly gave us thumbs up and mouthed, "Go for it," as we walked by. One teacher pulled us aside and whispered, "Your children are going to be fine." I said, "But just 2 days ago you said John would likely be nonverbal his whole life." "I have been in special education for over 20 years, she said. "I've seen enough kids to know that children who do well have one thing in common. They have fighters for parents." She looked me in the eye. "Your kids will be just fine." But the principal had an ace up his sleeve that we didn't anticipate. This particular school was contracted by our own district to deliver early intervention, as we lived in the smallest school district in the state. Our district had just one school, kindergarten to 6th grade. The principal of the contract school said that he was not obligated to accept the contract, and if we sued for a full ABA program, that he would just cancel the contract with our own district. I knew that our tiny district's budget wouldn't cover this, and that even if we sued and won, there was just no way to fund it, and time was ticking by.